You already know about Ashton Jeanty, the belle of the ball in this year's NFL draft class, but this might actually be the deepest running back class in NFL history. So we're going to go a bit further, talking about 17 running backs who can be valuable in fantasy football. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge. This is the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. This is going to be a really fun exercise for us to go ahead and rank all these players, put them in tiers. And honestly, we just finished putting together all of our rankings and scouting reports for the Football Guys Rookie Guide. This is going to be fun to talk about these because we have some disagreements.
We do, yeah. And this is a deep running class. It's really fun. I mean, we're going to dive into the weeds and talk about all these guys. I think a lot of them do have some warts, but, you look at this. I mean, it's usually like 5 or 6 guys that you're like, in a good position, these guys could flourish. We're talking about 17 guys today. And realistically, any of these 17 guys, if they get drafted by the right team with the opportunity, could be relevant in fantasy football. So depth. We're a little loose with that term. I mean, I think it's deep as in like potential NFL starters. I think the studs are kind of capped at 3, but either way, this is a really fun class. I mean, I just keep watching guys and I just keep seeing more guys that have NFL potential.
Yeah, this is the time of year where everyone's going to start saying, I'm watching more and more film. I'm learning more about these guys. And it's funny because I think we are going to get to the point, Dave, where we're going to look at like running back 2 and running back 10 or something and be like, they're all kind of pretty much the same. But the objective of this is for us to try to differentiate and see which guys do stand out a bit more. So what we're going to do today is we are going to go through the Football Guys Rookie Guide, which you can download for free right now. Absolutely free, with over 100 rookie profiles in here with rankings from myself, Dave,
Over
Jagger,
120.
Jeff.
Don't undersell it. We got over 120 in there.
No, I like to undersell and then over deliver. That's what we do. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the reports from the rookie guide, but then also just give our takes on these players and talk about where we have them ranked. So Dave, let's do this. Let's start off at number 1. Let's make this quick. Let's make this sweet. Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State. We both have him as the clear number 1. He is in tier 1 all by himself. The rookie guide has him as running back 1, as a big play threat with good vision, contact balance, and a yards after catch machine. He's a surefire first round pick. And, I just don't know that there's been a better running back prospect since maybe Saquon Barkley. Maybe he might be even better.
I've got best prospects since Saquon Barkley is what I put in my notes. I mean, like I've heard some people say the best since Barry Sanders. I don't know about all that. I mean, the NFL has changed. I think that 10 years ago, if Ashton Jeanty was coming into the league, he'd probably be a unanimous top 2, top 3 pick. Of course, now with running backs getting devalued a bit in the draft, we'll always see some teams that are going to reach. We saw the Lions do it a few years ago. We saw the Falcons do it as well, and some team might do that with Jeanty.
How'd that work out for them?
Yeah, I mean, not too bad. I mean, it worked out okay. Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, pretty good. Bijan Robinson, pretty good. We might see that this year, where a team is going to reach in the top 5 or in the top 10 for Jeanty, but also with the way that they're devalued in the NFL, we might see him fall into the late first and end up with a team like the Bengals or the Chiefs that could really use him, and then, just explosions in fantasy football. But we don't need to talk about Jeanty too much. I think everyone knows who he is. The one stat that really I like, that I think really tells the story of how good Ashton Jeanty is, isn't that he had the second most rushing yards in a single season in NCAA history. It's that he had more yards after contact this year than any running back had in overall rushing yards. That is the one that just blows my mind.
The other one, I thought this was the stat you were going to say, that I believe he has the second highest yards per route run of any running back in the modern era too, just behind Christian McCaffrey. Like this is a player that we're going to be putting up there with all the biggest names to ever grace the field for fantasy football or the NFL. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, he's an insane player. I would say if you're sitting there with the first pick in either Superflex or single quarterback dynasty leagues, don't overthink it. It's Ashton Jeanty, unless of course you want to go back and trade him for Ladd McConkey. That's a little throwback to our previous show. Dave, I don't think he gets past. I know we don't want to talk about this too long. How high could he go? I could actually see him going number 6 to Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it.
I don't think he falls past 12.
Pete Carroll would love it, to bring in a guy like that. Chicago at 10, if they want to try to
Mhm.
replicate what Ben Johnson had going in Detroit would make a lot of sense as well. We'll talk about a guy later that I think is a better fit for Chicago. Maybe even the Giants, though. I mean, at 3, it sounds a little bit crazy, but like we just saw that they were really feeling losing Saquon Barkley. And I don't think they're a team that should draft a running back in the top 3. I think that they have much bigger positional needs, but I could see John Mara there on draft day saying, "Hey, we need to replace what we lost in Saquon Barkley," and then making that reach on Ginty.
I was gonna say, what can make the Giants a really mediocre football team is getting a good running back all over again. That would help. All right, let's go down to the next tier. Tier number 2, we've got Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State. Dave, you've got him as your running back 2. I've got him at running back 3. I
The
think my only
horror.
I know, crazy. I think my only disparity here is a little bit of the injuries throughout college,
Mhm.
and is he going to be? He has the capabilities to be a 3-down running back in the NFL. Will an NFL team want to use him that way? I don't even know that it matters all that much anymore. I'm probably overthinking that too much. Like Jahmyr Gibbs is not a full 3-down running back yet. Phenomenal player. The guide here has Trevion Henderson as the running back 2, player comp to Aaron Jones. He is a big play threat that catches everything, a 3-down back, and just a wee bit undersized there, Dave.
Yeah, he's a little bit undersized, but Aaron Jones, I think, is a really good comp. I also see a lot of Alvin Kamara and a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs in his game, and we can see it. These guys that are just pass catching machines. I mean, he led the NCAA in yards per route run just 2 years ago, and he has had over 1 yard per route run in 3 of his last 4 seasons. So he is a big play threat with pass catching upside. And those guys, even if they aren't 3-down backs in the NFL, they could still be huge point accumulators. So I'm a big fan of Trevion Henderson. You already talked about the injuries. That's been the big knock on him so far in his college career. But I pulled this up. 54% of his runs last year went for 15 plus yards. That is ludicrous. That's a higher breakaway
Yeah.
run rate than Ashton Ginty had. Over half the times he touched the ball, he was picking up 15 plus yards. Like that is crazy. And this guy is just a big play threat every single time he touches the ball. I talked about a guy that I thought would be a better fit for the Bears, and it's Ashton Ginty. He might fall into round 2. The Bears have 2 picks in the second round at
You
39
mean
and
Trevion
41.
Henderson, right?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Trevion Henderson. Yeah.
Sorry, I just didn't
Um,
want the comments of us
yeah, yeah.
saying Ashton Ginty in the second round. Got it.
No. Trevion Henderson in round 2, I think it just makes so much sense. If you remember, Ben Johnson and DeAndre Swift didn't really have a perfect marriage in Detroit after 1 year together. Ben Johnson and the team decided to kind of ship DeAndre Swift out of Detroit for a sack of potatoes, and they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. I could see them maybe doing the same thing now with Ben Johnson in Chicago, getting rid of DeAndre Swift, bringing in Trevion Henderson, and kind of trying to rebuild what they had there in Detroit, where Roshan Johnson can be that early down guy, and Ashton Ginty could come in for third down, could come in on long and distance, but can also, he's got the contact balance and the strength that he can play early downs occasionally as well.
Yeah, I think the guy that I comped him to, I love the Aaron Jones comp. I think that's great. The guy I comped him to, just because of his creative run style and his ability to, like you said, get those long runs, was Ken Walker for me, because he
Yeah.
is very much an all or nothing runner, just like Ken Walker was coming
hmm
out of Michigan State. The difference here, obviously, is just the 3-down ability and being able to catch passes out of college, whereas that came a little bit later for Walker. But yeah, I love Trevion Henderson. I don't want to get into the habit of starting to say this is a slept-on player. He's underrated. Because
He's
we
not.
both have
He's a
him.
consensus top 3 guy. He's
Yeah,
very good. Yeah.
yeah. He's there. The other guy in this tier is Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. And Dave, we just got him flip-flopped. I've got Hampton at running back 2. You've got him at running back 3. Why do you hate Omarion Hampton? The guide has him comped to Joe Mixon, who I think that is the absolute perfect player comp for Omarion Hampton. I think he uses his size better than Joe Mixon ever did. At 6 foot, 220, we've got him listed as a power runner, 3-down back, a younger guy, big size, but not a huge route tree. So he's not going to be doing too much work downfield as a running back. It's going to be some simple swing passes here, but he's a guy could sneak into the first round of the NFL draft. He's got the size that you like and 2 back-to-back really productive years. What I like most about him is that he really leverages the linebackers really well. He knows he's not the fastest guy, so he uses his patience. In a way, I do feel like he's a little bit like Le'Veon Bell, just not quite the receiver that Lev ever was. And so, I mean, I think the Joe Mixon comp is perfect because it's a very similar run style where he's patient, he's just fast enough to beat linebackers and just strong enough to run guys over.
My comp for Amari Hampton was a pre-injury Javonte Williams. I see a lot of that, just a bruising back who likes to get downfield, doesn't shy away from contact. I think, first of all, what I want to say too, like I've got Travion Henderson above Hampton, you've got him flip-flopped, but I think where we agree here is that they are both very clearly the tier 2 guys behind
Yes.
Ginty. There's a little bit of fall-off after these guys. I've got Henderson and Hampton so close in my rankings, and I've even said that, regardless of, I think what we're going to see in the draft is when one of these guys goes off the board, the other guy's going to go almost immediately after because they are very similar, just slightly different styles. But what I like about Hampton is we know he can be a 3-down guy, back-to-back seasons at North Carolina where he had 250 plus carries and 30 plus targets. So he is, if he does end up in a good situation, he is one of the few guys that can handle, a massive workload in the NFL, can play all 3 downs. He's not the best pass catcher, but he's good enough, and he is a good pass blocker that'll keep him on the field on 3rd down. So I'm a big fan of Amari Hampton. I've got him behind Travion Henderson, but that doesn't mean that I dislike him by any means. I just prefer the big play upside and the pass catching chops that I think Henderson has that Hampton doesn't.
You and I tend to believe that college analytics, they are important, but they don't always tell the full story because teams skew so hard one direction or the other. This is one of those cases where I'll look at the stats and say, my dude had 1,500 rushing yards in back-to-back seasons, averaging nearly 6 yards a carry, 15 touchdowns. His final year, he gets to nearly 40 receptions. So I don't think there's anything hidden in there. I think this is just a good ball player who can do a little bit of everything. Is he going to be the most dynamic athlete? No, but you can absolutely use him in a 3-down role. And so that's why I've got him at running back too.
Yeah, I was looking yesterday, and I believe that Hampton is one of 3 players in this class who has amassed 3,000 plus rushing yards over the last 2 seasons. I think it's Ashton Ginty, Amari Hampton, and my guy Taj Brooks, who I don't think we're going to talk about today, but another compiler.
We're definitely not. But behind the scenes, Dave and I had a whole thing about Taj Brooks. Was like, he's really good. He could be a day 3 guy. Someone fall in love, and I'm like, Dave, I don't see it.
Sean Tucker. He's this year's Sean Tucker for me, a guy that I just can't quit on.
And we lost all the viewers right there. Let's go to tier number 3. Yep, tier 3.
RB4.
Where RB4, where we have Caleb Johnson. Dave, you got him as running back 4. I've got him as running back 5. With Caleb Johnson, he is absolutely a bruiser of a running back. 6 foot, 225 pounds. We've got him listed as a power runner and workout warrior. The player comp here is Najee Harris. I think it's safe to say that Caleb is probably going to be a 2nd round running back just simply because of his size, the production that he put up in his last year at Iowa, where, he had to go up against essentially everyone playing Iowa knew they were not throwing the ball. They're running the ball. And I think that's what's most impressive for me here is that Caleb was able to do what he could do against these stacked boxes, against defenses that know exactly what you're doing. Now, okay, go and try to beat us. And he did for the most part. How do you like Caleb?
I'm not crazy about him. And it's crazy. Here we are, just 4 running backs into the class, and we're already starting to talk about the warts that some of these guys have and some of the things that we dislike about him. I think the top 3, when we're talking about Ginty, Henderson, and Hampton, are very, very safe picks. Like, these guys are, I don't want to say scheme proof, but you could put him on just about any team and they're going to be able to find success. I feel like for Caleb Johnson, he is going to be dependent on landing in the right spot. Now, the Najee Harris comp, I think, is hilarious. Not in a bad way. I think it's a great comp because I think he would do great in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense behind that offensive line. That's what he had in Iowa, was a good offensive line that he was able to run behind. And I think that he kind of needs that in the NFL as well. Where I get a little bit worried about him is that he's not the best athlete, and he does have the prototypical size, but the long speed isn't there. The lateral quickness and shiftiness isn't really there. He's a guy who is just going to plod forward and pick up 4 or 5 yards. I don't think he's a bad running back, but I think that for fantasy, his upside could be capped a little bit because he's not a great pass catcher, and he also doesn't have the big play upside. He's a guy that I think you'd probably pencil in for 250, 300 touches on the right team. I just don't know if the game-breaking upside is there in Caleb Johnson's game.
Yeah, I don't really see it much either. I do think that he's going to fit a team that really wants a hammer, and then let the other running back be your lightning, because that's what people call it, the lightning and the hammer, right? That's
yeah. Or the drill and the thunder, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We're good at metaphors here on this show. You know what? It's interesting because we talk about him almost like he's a bad prospect, and he's not.
No,
It's
not at
just
all.
that
Yeah.
it's just that in this class, putting him at RB4, RB5. Last year, he might have been in contention with Jonathan Brooks. I think talent-wise, Brooks was better, but coming off the injury, there's a very real shot that Caleb Johnson could have been the RB1 drafted last year. Do I agree with that? No, but I think that it was very possible. So to say that he's our RB4 here, maybe RB5, potentially going mid to late second round.
That's just a testament to how good some of the
Yes.
other running backs are. Yes.
And that's exactly it. That's
And
exactly
let's
it.
rewind a little bit. I mean, would it surprise you if these top 3 guys that we talked about all go in round 1? I mean, they're 3 really good prospects when we're talking about Ginty, Henderson, and Hampton.
Yep.
It wouldn't surprise me if all of these guys are off the board before pick 32.
Well, and we've said here that we're going deep with 17 players, but by all accounts, there are many of the industry experts saying that we could see 30 to 35 running backs drafted in this draft, and that would probably put us at a higher number than most. Usually, you're seeing somewhere around 20 to 25, maybe 30 at a really high, high year for the running back position. But the fact that it's kind of like 30 should be the floor with how many good ones there are, it's going to be a good year. Let's go to the next guy in this tier, and it's Quinshon Judkins, who I have as my running back 4. Dave, you have him as your running back 7. And it's funny because for the longest time, every time I saw a highlight for Judkins, it was one of these like long explosive plays out of Ole Miss where basically everything just breaks for a big open play all the time in that offense. And I was like, oh, it was always like the small videos that you see on Twitter. I was like, oh, he's probably a speedy guy, another like Jahmyr Gibbs type. And then I got the film and I started watching the All-22 and I'm like, this dude's big and kind of slow, but he's also pretty good. And it's funny, I thought of Jahmyr Gibbs the first time when I saw a highlight, but then when I watched the film, I comped him to David Montgomery. Yeah. And that's exactly where I see him. He's 6 foot, around 220 pounds. He's a workhorse size running back. He was the 1B in Ohio State after transferring from Ole Miss. We've got him listed here in the Football Guys rookie guide as a power runner, a 3-down back. He's got great contact balance. The problem is, he's got a little bit of those tight hips, Dave. I didn't see a guy that could move laterally very well. He doesn't make a lot of guys miss in open space, and there's a lack of that long speed that you want to see out of a running back. But I think he becomes a very good hammer to someone's lightning.
Yeah, he looked slower last year than he did in years past, which was a little bit concerning if you're already starting to see that wear off a little bit. And I think that both of these guys, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, there's a little bit of the allure of the unknown with them because we saw them splitting touches in Ohio State. And I think that it was very sharp of Ryan Day to do that, to kind of adopt the NFL mentality of having this RB1A, RB1B type of system where he can keep both of these guys fresh. But it does make them a little bit mysterious coming into the NFL draft because we know what Quinshon Judkins can do well. But is he going to be a 3-down back? Can he do the pass catching at the NFL that we didn't see a ton of in the NCAA? But I think that you're right. The lateral agility for me is a little bit of a concern. He's a very physical runner, and I think that NFL teams are going to like that. But kind of like we were talking about Caleb Johnson, if he doesn't have the pass catching and he doesn't have the big play threat, he could volume his way into a fantasy relevant role. But I don't know if he's ever going to have that really, really high ceiling at the NFL.
Where he could find himself getting on the field, Judkins, in a 3-down role is not just because of his size and all that, but I was reading a lot of people saying that he's not a very good pass blocker. And that was one of the things that I was just kind of like, I must be on an island alone on this one, because when I was watching him, he seems to be much improved in pass blocking. And I think that's an Ohio State thing where they are going to force you to be an NFL type player. You've got to be good at everything, because what I saw from the 2024 film was that he could pass block. And do it pretty well. Like he had a good anchor in his feet, a good punch to his hands, always with the right placement. If there's a way for him to get on the field on 3rd downs or passing downs, it's probably as a good pass blocker, and he's going to have to show that throughout camp. But yeah, I think he's one of the last guys, I think, in this draft class that you look at him and say, there's a 3-down role there for him in the next level.
And I say it all the time, good pass blocking leads to snaps, snaps lead to routes, and routes lead to targets. So sometimes that's the best thing you could do as a young prospect, is be a good pass blocker, because then it's just a matter of time before that pass blocking turns into a pass catching role.
Yeah. All right, last guy in tier 3, running back 6 is Devin Neal, who, Dave, you have him at running back 5. I have him at running back 6. We've kind of already talked about this, is that like he might be moving around the board a little bit more, to be quite honest.
What was the text I sent you yesterday? I think I said the more I watch Devin Neal, the less I like him.
Yeah, and you know what? That's actually the exact opposite of what our very own Cecil Lammey said when he was at the Senior Bowl. It was the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl, one of those. I can't remember which one he went to. Shrine Bowl. where he was like,
Could be wrong. Don't quote me on
every
that.
day, like he said, I wasn't impressed with Devin Neal on the first day, but every day he got better, which was the opposite of some of the other players that were there. Neal's got this great size, 5'11", 215. He at the Shrine Bowl, he weighed in at 220, or Senior Bowl, whichever one he went to. I don't know, the bowl that he went to, he weighed in at 220. And it's actually kind of funny to hear him in an interview with Cecil that we have over on our social media. Make sure you're following us at FBG Fantasy on Instagram and at Football Guys everywhere else. He actually comps himself to Alvin Kamara. And I was like, this might be one of the least self-aware dudes in the draft because you're 220 pounds, sir. Like, you should be running guys over. And Dave, I think that's where some of my concern comes from, is that he's a big guy that doesn't play like a big guy. I love the 3 years of excellent production, over 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns all these years. I think he's the Kansas all-time leading rusher now. But I want to see a game that translates to the NFL a little bit better.
So the first note that I have in my, scouting notes on Devin Neal is plays like a little itty bitty scat back. That's what I wrote about Devin Neal, because it's weird. Like when you watch him play, it almost feels like you're watching this tiny guy. And I don't know if it's just that he plays so low to the ground or the way that he moves, but I, just like you, was shocked to see his weight. The fact that he weighed in at 220 is crazy. I'm not, and like I said, the more I watch of him, the less I like, because I think that his highlight reel is amazing. You watch all the big plays and you watch the breakaway runs. It's impossible to ignore that upside that he has. But all of the things that anybody who's watched this show knows that I am just a DeAndre Swift hater through and through. The shying away from contact, the east-west movement, the pitter-patter behind the line of scrimmage, the bad vision, the willingness to shy away from contact in the open field. All of those things continually show up in Devin Neal's tape the more you watch him. And that's my fear, is that he is this big guy who should be punishing guys out in the open field, but instead he's dancing away from contact and wasting a lot of movement going east west. So the upside is there. I think that if he gets drafted to a team that has a good developmental core that can kind of coach him up a little bit, we can see him develop into a good player. But if he doesn't shake some of those bad tendencies that continuously show up in his college tape, I worry that his floor in the NFL could be very, very low.
Yeah, I share the same concerns. Let's go to our next tier here, where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 running backs. There's going to be RB 7 through 12, who I genuinely believe every single one of these guys could be interchangeable. But yeah, let's start at running back 7, where we've got Cam Skattebo. I've been told that is how you pronounce it, not Skattebo, from Arizona State. Skattebo, yes. Awesome name for a running back. Absolutely awesome name for a running back. Dave, you've got him as your running back 6. I've got him as running back 11. I think he is a lot of people's darling after that phenomenal playoff run that Arizona State had, his big game against Texas, and honestly, he's just fun to watch. He's yeah, puke and rally. Yeah. He's just fun to watch. Like yeah. He's essentially the juggernaut. Like the way he runs is just put the helmet down and just run into walls. And that's one of the things I like and dislike about him, because I think there would be bigger plays for him if he could play the game with his eyes up. And that's something that he does in both pass blocking and running. And I wish that he could see the lanes a little bit better. But the rookie guide here has him comped to James Conner, a guy who just basically runs dudes over. He is looking to crush defenders every time he's got the ball. We've got him listed as a power runner with good vision and a lack of speed. So, Dave, he's projected as a 3rd to 4th round pick in the NFL draft. I think that's about right. What do you like about Skattebo?
I mean, you look at what he did at ASU. He was just the engine that powered that offense. I mean, 2nd in attempts, 2nd in rushing yards, 2nd in missed tackles forced, 3rd in yards after contact. I mean, it was a lot of volume that really propped up his statistics last year. But you don't give volume to a guy that isn't good. Like, he deserved that volume, and that's why he got it. Now, a lot of those breakaway runs that you saw in college where he was ripping off the 60, 70, 80-yard touchdowns, those are great. But those are 12, 15-yard rushes in the NFL. He's not going to be outrunning guys in the secondary in the NFL. And I think that's the fear. Like a lot of these guys that we've talked about, he doesn't have the long speed to be the big play threat. But I think that NFL teams are just going to love him because he is such a punishing running back. He's one of those guys that can just wear defenses down, get better as the game goes on. My comp, I get silly with my comps, Alfredo. You know this. My comp for Cam Skattebo is playoff Lenny. No, it's not Leonard Fournette, and it's not the Leonard Fournette we watch at LSU. It's not early career Leonard Fournette in the Jaguars. I'm comping Cam Scatterbo to a 28-year-old Leonard Fournette because that's the way that he plays. He just runs dudes over, and he isn't a liability in the passing game. He can pass block. He's got shockingly soft hands for his size. Doesn't have the long speed where he's going to rip off big plays for you, but he is just a technically sound, good, punishing running back. And I think NFL teams are just going to be drooling to get this guy.
Yeah, I think he's going to be one of those players that coaches really like. He's going to be a really good practice player that's going to earn himself some reps. I think that what's going to happen is that through the draft process, there's going to be a lot of, well, he doesn't have the great speed. Well, he's not a super dynamic athlete. We can probably get him in round 4, early day 3, and go draft him. And that's likely what will end up happening, is that teams won't feel the need to go and reach for a guy like this. And even though there is a big committee movement with running backs, he's not necessarily, I don't tend to see these power running backs as the guys that teams reach for. They reach for the dynamic guys, the Jahmyr Gibbs, the receivers, those kind of guys. So I think there's definitely going to be a role for Scatterbo. And we mentioned this with Neil. I think Scatterbo's one of those guys that could actually be a 3-down back if there is an injury and he's got to take over. I just don't know that a team would actually ever need to do that or want to do that with him.
It would be like oh crap, we got nobody else. Scatterbo's going to be our 3-down back for the next 4 weeks type of thing. Yes. I think that's you're not going to see 17 games of a 3-down workload, but if the situation arises where he needs to, he can absolutely step into that role. And you look at a guy like James Conner, he kind of developed that over the year. That's why I like that player comp. He wasn't always a 3-down back, but that is what he is now. He developed into that over time. One last thing I'll say, and you did talk about it, we have a bit of a disparity on our rankings here. Yeah. I just want to put an asterisk on every conversation that we're having here because I do default pretty heavily to NFL draft capital. And right now I'm expecting that NFL teams are going to like Scatterbo because of what he did in college. But if he falls into round 6, I'm definitely knocking him down in my rankings. And similarly, some of the guys that we're talking about that I might be a little bit lower on, if an NFL team reaches for those players, I'm moving them up my rankings. So right now, we're speculating on these guys in February. I do lean pretty heavily on draft capital and where these guys go. So that also ties in with our rookie guide, where we released version 1 right now, but we're going to have a post-combine version coming out and a post-draft version coming out. Right now, we're working with an incomplete puzzle. We're watching these players, we're seeing what we like, but the combine and the draft are huge pieces to that puzzle, and we're just going to keep putting together more and more over the next few months here.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's a funny thing with Scatterbo. I have him comped to Zamir White because that's the player that I see there. Zamir White was a 4th-round pick. I think that's the same thing that happens with Scatterbo here, and it could be the exact same story. He falls into a big role, gets some production. Next guy on here, we actually have him tied, but we're going to go with RJ Harvey, the UCF running back, who I have him at RB8. You have him at RB9. I want to talk about Scatterbo before because you had him ranked a little bit higher at 6. But RJ Harvey, Dave, interesting guy that it looks like both you and I are a little bit higher on than the actual Football Guys draft guide. And the comp that they have here for their RB10, I say there, like we weren't part of this guide, for the RB10.
40% of the equation in these consensus rankings, yes.
Yeah. I get it. He's not all that big, 5'9", 208. The explosive ability, when you see it looks like you're watching a Boobie Miles highlight tape when you're in the middle of Friday Night Lights, just watching RJ Harvey out in the open field. It's absolutely insane. He's great in the passing game. So we've got him listed as a guy that catches everything, great route runner, a little undersized and a little lack of speed. But I'm going to say this, Football Guys rookie guide, I didn't see a lack of speed. I saw a guy who made a lot of explosive plays. His player comp in here is Darrell Henderson. He's a guy that had back-to-back 1,400 and 1,500 years, 1,400 and 1,500 rushing yard years with 16 and 22 touchdowns, always involved in the passing game. I think this is the kind of guy that both fantasy managers and NFL GMs look for as a good early day 3 fit for their NFL draft.
And he is one of those guys that I think is going to be very dependent on his landing spot. And the a couple of fits that we have here, the ideal scheme fits, I couldn't agree more with. The Bengals and the Chiefs, he'd be great there. Miami already has a surplus of running backs, but I think that RJ Harvey is the perfect kind of guy that would fit in that sort of scheme where they can get him out wide, one cut, and he's off to the races. I'm also a little surprised to see the lack of speed in our rookie guide because I saw a guy who was, in my opinion, one of the fastest guys that I think I scouted in this class. Yeah. I mean, the first note that I have here is human joystick a la Tariq Cohen, because that's what I saw. I mean, this guy was just carving defenses up, whether it was straight line speed or lateral agility. He was bouncing all over the place. And you look, his breakaway run rate, 52.4%, that was right up there with Ashton Ginty and Travion Henderson. I mean, this guy is a big play waiting to happen. 5'9", 208, a little bit undersized, and we're not going to ignore that. But the NFL has changed where we can see these undersized guys now fall into roles where they can get, 150, 200 touches a year. And that's enough to give them RB1 production if they're hitting the big plays and they're catching passes. So I think it's going to be very dependent on where he lands. But if he lands in a situation that already has good playmakers that afford him the ability to get out in space and make those big plays, that's what he does best. So I think that's why you and I are both a little bit higher on him, not because we're saying that he's going to get drafted super high and that he's going to be a very good running back, but just that in the right situation, his ceiling can be so high at the NFL.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And I think that's the cool thing about this rookie guide is that it's not one person giving their opinion throughout everything. It's like a group of like 5 or 6 of us all writing up scouting reports, putting in our own rankings and really making this an amalgamation. So you don't just get one person's opinion because listen, if it was just me writing this rookie guide, there's probably going to be some things that are wrong and you're going to say, well, can't really trust Alfredo. But when you can trust 5 or 6 different people that are putting their heads together, watching the film, going through the analytics, getting the scouting reports ready, it's something that you can trust. And if you haven't already, check the link below this video or in this audio version of the podcast. Make sure you are going to footballguys.com/rookie guide, where you're going to get your free version of this guide. Version 1, totally free. Once we start adding all the other stuff like combine and relative athletic score, well, not quite so free. We can't give you guys everything for free. All right, next one on here. Same tier. Running back 9. We've got Ollie Gordon II, running back for Oklahoma State. He's 6'2", 225. This is a big dude, and the player comp is probably perfect with Braylon Allen.
Yeah.
I remember all the all the dynasty people were super excited for Ollie Gordon as like that's going to be potentially your number 1 guy next year with Ashton Ginty, and a bit of a fall off this past year. He's a power runner. He's a young guy, but we really didn't see that next step for him. He had a fantastic 2023, not so great in 2024, Dave.
Yeah, and that's why I was very low on Ollie Gordon at first, because I started watching his 2024 tape and I reached out to Jeff Bell, host of the Dynasty show, huge piece of this rookie guide that we put out here. And I said, what am I missing with Ollie Gordon? And he goes, just go back and watch what he did in 2023. And then I was like, well, there it is. I felt like I was watching 2 completely different players. Jeff made a good point too, that Oklahoma State this year, got off to a really slow start. And in his opinion, he's like, I think Ollie Gordon just kind of checked out midseason and stopped playing for a team that didn't really have much going for him, which, well, understandable, is also kind of a red flag for me.
You don't want to hear that.
Can't, yeah, I don't want to see guys who are 21 years old, phoning in their last year in college. So I understand that there's some context that needs to be added with him. Yeah, I mean, I think draft capital is going to be important for a guy like Ollie Gordon. I think that I'm going to continue to stay a little bit lower than consensus on him just because I wasn't crazy about what I saw in 2024. I think that his draft stock is kind of pushed up by a lot of people still holding on to that 2023, those hopes and dreams. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where he lands, but wasn't crazy about the player that I saw on tape last year.
Yeah, and it's very reminiscent of Braylon Allen, his player comp in the guy, who had himself a big freshman year, and then kind of every subsequent year after that, it got a little bit worse over there in Wisconsin. And that's same vibe here with Ollie Gordon over in Oklahoma State. And I think we're going to talk a lot about so many of these players fitting into a role of being either the Lightning or the Thunder and how they're going to fit. Like, this is another one of these guys that, listen, a team that already has a very dynamic running back 1 on their team, they'll take a chance on a young, big running back like Ollie Gordon and put him in a committee. And if he can make some plays the way Braylon Allen did, awesome. That's exactly what an NFL team's going to want out of him. I don't know that he ever becomes the guy that in Dynasty we're saying, man, thank you. I'm so happy that I drafted him round 1 because he's the complete 3-down back that gives me everything I could have wanted. Like, I don't know that I see the draft gem.
Yeah, and I think that he's going to be one of those guys that I'm just unfortunately not going to be able to draft a lot of, because there are a lot of people who have known the name for years and they're going to reach for him. And unfortunately, I think I'm just going to remain a little bit below consensus on Gordon.
This is one of those guys, and we'll say this throughout the process, where I think testing is going to be big for him. What's going to be the relative athletic score? What's the 40 time going to be? How is he going to look in receiving drills, stuff like that when he goes to the combine? If he does, in fact, weigh in at 225 and then goes and runs a 4.4, I think NFL teams are just going to start to use the 2024 film as a wash and go back to the 2023 film and say, this is the potential he could have. He may get drafted a little bit higher, but that's where testing does come into play with these guys. Let's go to running back 10 here. Damian Martinez out of Miami. I've got him as the running back 9. Dave, you have him as RB 12. The rookie guide, once again, we're disagreeing here. Damn you, rookie guide. He's got it. They have him at RB 7 here.
So
in the football
quite a bit lower than our colleagues on Damian Martinez.
A little bit lower. Very similar draft projection to a lot of the guys we talked about before him, looking at probably an early day 3 pick, round 4. He is seen as a power runner, 3 down back, lack of speed. At 6 feet, 232 pounds, yeah, I get it. The comp here is Ramondre Stevenson. And Dave, for me, the thing is I get it. Productive guy at Miami, back-to-back 1,000-yard years. He's a little bit of usage in the receiving game, but he started to get outplayed by the other running back in the committee there in Miami, and we started to see his volume start to trickle down. And when you see that from a guy, yeah, he got his 1,000 yards, but the rush attempts started to go down a little bit. And it was one of those things. I put on a game film to watch Cam Ward going up against Louisville, and then seeing Damian Martinez being taken out of these games so much because he wasn't as effective as his running mate, who I'm forgetting the name right now.
Mark
Fletcher. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. That's one of the things that makes me hold back a little bit. So maybe this is the perfect thing for him, is to be an RB2 on a team. But we're saying that about all these guys at this point, right? Is that like they're all better as the RB2?
This class is very deep with RB2s.
Yeah, I just don't see the RB1 stuff there for him. And that's the big deciding factor in why I have him lower.
Yeah, I think, playing with Cam Ward opened up a lot of opportunities for him to get out into the secondary. And that's where we saw a lot of his big broken tackles, were him blowing up defensive backs with a full head of steam. But for a guy that weighs 232 pounds, I didn't see him breaking a lot of tackles near the line of scrimmage or on linebackers. He goes down on first contact a lot. And I think the highlights you see are him just plowing through little guys deep downfield. I'm a little bit concerned. The long speed isn't there. And then I think that he doesn't play with the strength I'd want to see for a guy his size. He kind of reminds me of LeGarrette Blount when I watch him play. I understand the upside case for a guy like Damian Martinez, but again, like we just talked about, I'm okay being a little bit lower on some of these guys. I'm a little bit lower on Ollie Gordon. I'm a little bit lower on Damian Martinez. And, I've got to do that to get guys that I like Cam Scadaboo and RJ Harvey up in my rankings. It's not that I think Damian Martinez is going to be terrible or anything like that. I just think that he's going to be very limited to short yardage work. Now, if he lands on an explosive offense that's going to afford him a lot of goal line opportunities, the out is certainly there in fantasy football. I just don't know if that is what you're hoping for when you're drafting somebody in your dynasty rookie drafts, is a guy that's going to rush for 500 yards and 12 touchdowns.
There's also a big difference, Dave, that we need to settle right here between a guy that's good for the NFL and will likely get drafted higher in the NFL draft versus a player who will tend to be more productive for fantasy football. And that's where you've got to start to look at some of these profiles, where does this guy profile as a dynamic player who's going to be catching a lot of passes, or does this guy profile as someone who's going to come in on 3rd and 1, get the first down and come back off the field, so that the more dynamic guys are going to be playing a little bit more. And that's kind of where I see Damian Martinez right now. All right, next one on here. Running back 11, Dylan Sampson. This is another guy that we're a little far on, Dave. You've got him as running back 8. I've got him at running back 15. Self-admittedly, probably a little too low on Dylan Sampson, but there's just so many of these guys that I can say that with like 7 or 8 of them, where I'm too low, where I'm too high, and I'll
just say, like,
flex this.
Basically RB7 through RB17 is where, like, I struggle so much to rank these guys because they're all so different. And it's like, do you want the small, undersized guy with the big play upside, or do you want the big bruising guy? I mean, it's really tough to put these guys in linear rankings because they all have things that I really like about them and things that I dislike about them. So when you're looking at our rankings and you see, an 8-player disparity between my ranking and your ranking, it really doesn't say as much as the numbers may imply, because all of these guys after RB7 are so close.
Yeah. And this is a perfect example of a guy, Dylan Sampson, who I think has all the physical playmaking ability of a guy that we mentioned way earlier, like RJ Harvey, and even some of these other guys a little bit higher. Like, I think that he's probably a better athlete than Devin Neal. I just don't think he's as complete a player as some of those guys. And I know that the Tennessee offense tends to lead to very productive players that don't quite always work out in the NFL. And that's something that's mentioned here in the Football Guys Rookie Guide. I think the big thing for me is that if you are a little bit more undersized, 5'11", 201 pounds, yeah, sure. I mean, we have it here on the badges. Finds open space, good vision, but undersized, poor blocker. If you're going to be undersized and you're going to be the explosive playmaker, I want you to be someone that I can put into the game on passing downs so that I know you're going to be there. And receiving was never really his game, and being a bad blocker is not going to get you onto the field. And that's something where, like, I just kind of, I let that be sort of the wall for me on Dylan Sampson, which is why I have him a bit lower.
So I think what I really like about Dylan Sampson, like when you look at his profile and you see an undersized guy with blazing speed, you assume that they're going to get this guy out in space and that he's going to be running jet sweeps and, end arounds and things like that. He did so much of his damage between the tackles. And that's what I really like. I mean, he is a very technically sound runner. Like you can see him, showing lateral agility without even losing his downhill ability. I mean, just his footwork between messy piles at the line of scrimmage is what really jumped out to me. And I think that that's something that can translate that we didn't see from a lot of these other Tennessee guys. I think Jalen Wright is a perfect example of a guy who has fed the ball outside on wide zone schemes so often that he was able to rip off these big plays, where Dylan Sampson was doing it differently. Like he was just pounded between the tackles and still continuously ripping off big plays. So I understand what you're saying about the history of these big play guys from Tennessee. As a Bears fan, I'm all too familiar with Velus Jones and how he translated to the NFL. But with Dylan Sampson, I just see a more mature runner than I think a lot of people realize.
I do agree with that. I do think that he's a different runner than what we saw from a guy like maybe Jalen Wright last year, who Jalen Wright was that slasher. Let's get him outside and let's get him into space. And that works perfectly for a team like Miami. I actually love our player comp that we have here in the guide for Dylan Sampson, which is Jerome Ford, because that is exactly who Jerome Ford was. Is good between the tackles, a one cut and go fast guy who does have some decent vision. Wasn't the big receiving back that you wanted. So I could see it with Dylan Sampson where he could be a very good running back. I'm not ecstatic about the profile. Now we get to another guy here who I really like the profile, but I think there are some very real warts that we have to talk about, Dave. And at running back 12, last running back in this tier, we've got LaQuint Allen from Syracuse, who I have him as running back 7 in this class, and I might get higher on LaQuint Allen as this process goes along. I want to see what he weighs in at. I want to see what he runs at, because his game film shows a guy who's very good in open space, an incredible receiver who I'm just going to put the stamp right here. Best receiving back in this class. Yes, over Ginty and some of these other top runners here. He's essentially a wide receiver that has been placed at running back. And we've seen this with guys like Tyrone Tracy, who was one of my comps that I put for this guide. We ended up going with Tony Pollard as someone for this for the rookie guide here. The badges that we've got, he's young. He's only 20 years old and essentially still learning the running back position. Good vision, good contact balance for a guy who's so high cut. He's actually very lean at 200 pounds, 6 feet tall, very lean, and he's a high runner. So that is one of those things that's bad for him. But the positional versatility of the guy that can be put all over the field, you can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide, you can put him in really any running back set you need him for. I really, really like the production profile on LaQuint Allen. He's a guy that just catches a ton of passes, led the nation in both targets and receptions this past year, and he's been a back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher. LaQuint Allen on a Syracuse team that kind of underperformed throughout the year.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on LaQuint Allen a lot, because I am definitely, when you look at our consensus ranking among the 5 of us in the rookie guide, I am by far the lowest on him. You already called out some of his warts. He's a very upright runner. Yep. He is very, very lean and thin. And that's what concerns me a little bit, is he does play like he is a power back. I mean, he doesn't shy away from contact. He hits a lot of guys, but I'm not sure how 201 pounds is I think what he's listed at.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that is going to translate to the NFL. And 201, is thin, but it's 6 foot 201. You watch him play, he's a very lean guy. My comp for him was Ozempic, Derrick Henry. He has that upright run style. He's great at putting that 1 foot in the ground and cutting up field. The only problem is where Derrick Henry runs through guys, LaQuinn Allen often goes down on that first contact. Now the pass catching is, I think, something that is very alluring, and he does. You called this out a while back, Alfredo, but I see it when I watch his game. He looks like one of those converted wide receivers. Like when you watch him play, I see some Tyrone Tracy, I see some Antonio Gibson in his game. So I think that he is going to be very I don't know the word I'm looking for. He's going to be susceptible to where he's drafted. If they
Right.
put him in a role where he can be used as the third down guy and they put him in the slot and they use him as more of a receiver, the upside case for him is absolutely there. Just watching him as a running back, I do have concerns about how his size is going to translate to the NFL game.
Yeah, and that's why I do say, like, if he shows up to the NFL Combine at 210 pounds and he goes in and runs a 4.4 like expected, I'm going to remain pretty high on LaQuint Allen because I got to see that he can carry that weight and still run and do all the things that he's been able to do. But if he shows up at 200 pounds, runs a 4.5, and we're saying, okay, he's undersized, he's not running as fast. I love the production profile and I do like the film, but there's certain things that just don't cut it in the NFL. You've got to be big, you've got to be fast, you have to be able to do those things. So then, I think the draft stock will drop a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the final tier here, where we've got Trevor Etienne, and I'm just going to list all the guys here. Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, Jordan James out of Oregon, Woody Marks out of USC, Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers, and DJ Giddens out of Kansas State.
Taj
Dave,
Brooks doesn't make this tier?
No, Taj Brooks does not make this tier. He doesn't make the next tier either. Sorry, buddy.
We'll have at least one show on Taj Brooks this year, I promise.
Maybe we'll see. Trevor Etienne, he's the guy at number 13 here, and smaller but a little more compact, not quite as productive as his brother or having the same skill set, but I actually think he's a better receiver than his brother ever was. Ironically, I think a lot of people thought of Travis Etienne as a good receiver, and he's just been kind of one of those guys that was a product of his environment. But Trevor Etienne is one of those guys that was used in the lightning role often for Georgia, and he was kind of, I don't want to say that he was reduced, but I think he was just kept fresh where he could make big plays over and over and over. And where I see his value is in the passing game, Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how similar it is to what Georgia did a few years back with James Cook, where they bring in the little brother of a first round running back and kind of put him in this complementary role. The little, smaller, younger, not quite as fast brother. I mean, I think that's exactly what you're getting with Trevor Etienne. I don't dislike him at all. I think that he can be fine in the right position, but a little bit undersized, a little bit slow. He's another one of those guys that if he lands with a team that wants to utilize the pass catching upside, it's there in fantasy, but he could also get drafted to a team where he ends up kind of being just an injury away guy that we're hoping on.
And you're going to hear us say this with all the guys in this tier. He's fine.
He's fine.
Yeah. It's going to matter where these players end up. And I still say this, and I'll keep saying it, testing will matter. Not as much as we want it to. Like, I don't think that a player shoots up multiple rounds because of running well or that they magically become a better player. But it's about how those breakaway runs translate on film when you know a guy has a 4.3 speed or what kind of weight they carry when they run these times. Because that sort of changes things when you're trying to equate it to what you see on film. Next guy on here, Jordan James, who I have him at running back 13, Dave. You have him at running back 14. I'm kind of all over the place with him because I see the flashes with him. I do think he's a good player. I don't know that I see something super special with Jordan James. And that's, I hate to say that about a prospect coming in, but he's sort of got the average speed, average size, 5'10", 210. He's young, sure, and he's got good vision, contact balance. These are all the badges that we have here, and he's our football guys running back 13. I think a lot of people are going to see Oregon and expect Bucky Irving, but I think the player comp that we have here for him is actually kind of good. Kyron Williams, where he wasn't a special athlete either, and the film wasn't all that special either, but he ended up in a good spot and was able to develop. I think that's very possible for Jordan James.
Yeah, Jordan James just needs to find his Sean McVay, and he'll have himself a very productive
NFL
easy. Career. Yeah, just find a coach who wants to give you the ball 350 times a year. Duh. I'm not crazy about Jordan James. And I watched him, and I'm a little bit lower on him than some of our colleagues. I see a very spastic runner. His vision and his creativity, especially in the open field, worries me. It seems like every time he would take on contact, it was accidental. Like he would just get blindsided by a defender and get blown up. I'm a little bit concerned about his refinement. And that's the thing, he's not very refined. He's not very big. He's not very athletic. He's another one of those guys, right situation could be something, but not a guy that I'm really banking on. I think he falls late into day 3 and is probably going to be buried on a depth chart somewhere just because he doesn't have anything that really separates him from any other running backs in a room.
I will say, I think there is a fine line between a guy that is scared of contact versus a guy that is self-aware of who he is. And
Yeah.
I, the thing is that I don't know if that always translates well. DeAndre Swift is one of those guys who is very self-aware. I don't want to take on a lot of contact, but NFL coaches and NFL teammates don't always like to see that. So
hmm
it just doesn't always work. When you're a college player trying to keep your draft stock alive, I get it. But that's something that if it is a habit that continues into the NFL, it may not be really well liked. Let's go to the next guy. We got 3 more running backs here. At 15, we've got Woody Marks, running back out of USC. And this is an intriguing one, man. He's another guy with the average size, 5'10", 208. I personally think average speed. I don't know that I saw a super special athlete on film, but he caught a lot of passes. He caught a lot of passes in college, Dave. And he had 1 year specifically in 2021, 83 catches. It's just insane. Now, I know that he has the most receptions out of any running back in this draft class. I'll say this. It's easy to do that when you've got 5 years of experience on here.
Right.
His time at Mississippi
4
State,
of which were at Mississippi State, where they were just, yeah.
flooding running backs with passes, man. Like Dylan Johnson, who eventually went to Washington and eventually didn't end up doing anything for the NFL, was the third leading receiver on that team. So like these are the times where I say analytics kind of don't give all the context. When he goes to USC, still productive in the passing game, gets himself finally a 1,000-yard rushing season. I'm just not too fond of guys who have 5th-year breakouts and don't have a lot of special traits. But I don't think he's a bad player. I just think he's going to be a day 3 guy that gets picked up. I comped him to Rashad White.
Yeah, I like the Rashad White comp a lot. Woody Marks, I like him. I'm quite a bit higher on him than you are. It wasn't just the target volume, but it was also the efficiency. I mean, 4 straight seasons that he had over a yard per route run, which is, a good bar to clear, and he did that for 4 straight seasons. I think he's a pretty good athlete. I saw a lot of breakaway plays on his film where he was able to outrun the defense, and that doesn't always translate to the NFL. But I mean, I saw somebody with a lot of speed. The age worries me a little bit. In Dynasty, I'm going to be a little bit lower than him, but I think he's just so pro ready that I think a team that can draft him on day 3, they could immediately plug him in, and there's no development here. There's no hopes. There's no dreams. It's just he is a pro ready running back. His expectancy might only be a handful of years because, he's got a lot of tread on those tires, or not a lot of tread left on those tires. And he's already 24 years old. But I see a guy who can be immediately relevant in the right situation.
Yep, right situation. You get him involved in the passing game, and I think he'll have some fantasy relevance.
Got the same cop out for every player in this tier. Well, if he gets drafted to the right situation.
Well, dude, we're talking about guys that are probably going to like round 6,
Right,
and we're like,
right.
I mean, there's a reason they're going there. Last 2 players on here. And this one is fun. When you watch the film, he's just a blast to watch. Kyle Monangai, fun name to say too. Monangai, yeah. It's fun to say. 5'9",
I think just that
pounds.
Fun film and a fun name is going to push him like a round higher than he deserves to go in drafts.
There's absolutely going to be a coach and a GM that look at this and go, "Oh my God, we need a guy like this on the team," because all he does is search for contact, just run over people. Which is crazy given his size, 209 pounds, but he's thickly built. And what's funny is I think he's almost a direct player comp to the guy that was also at Rutgers not too long ago, and it's Isaiah Pacheco. Like, I just see the exact same dude. He runs like he's pissed off at the ground. He's not really heavily involved in the receiving game. And Monangai is just one of these guys that I think is going to be really well liked by NFL coaches and GMs for what he can do in practice and for the aggression and the effort. He's a high effort player at all times, and coaches are really going to like that. But I don't know that he'll have the fantasy profile that we want to see because of his lack of usage on passing downs.
Yeah, I hate the comp because nobody's ever going to live up to it, but he's like a mini Deebo Samuel when you watch him play. I mean, even a very similar running style. He runs kind of upright and then just drops his shoulder right before he takes on contact. He is such a bruising player, good contact balance. it seems like what jumps out to me, the very Debo-esque part of his game, is that he's always leaning forward when he runs. Like even when he's in the open field, like he is just waiting for that contact, and you know that he just thrives on just punishing defenders. So I like him. I think he's going to be another one of those guys that the NFL really likes. I'm not sure what his role is going to look like in the NFL. Definitely not a 3-down guy. I'm not even sure that you're going to want to give him any more than like 150 touches in a season. But I think he's going to make the most of his opportunities. And wouldn't surprise me if he's one of those guys that's just floating around in the league for 10, 12 years because the aggression just keeps him bouncing around.
He's going to be one of those Mike Boone guys that we pick up every year in the fantasy playoffs. We start him. He's going to get you a really solid 9.5 PPR points.
Brandon Bolden.
0 receptions.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, last guy on here, DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. Dave, this is an interesting one because even though he's our last guy on the list at running back 17, I think there's a very real possibility that he could have been all the way up at like running back 10, where some of these other guys are. He's got a decent receiving profile, except there's probably one too many drops in his stat sheet that we don't like to see. Back-to-back years, over 1,200 rushing yards. He's very similar to LaQuint Allen in that he's got that taller, leaner frame. I think I want to see better vision from him. I do see a guy that does have the athleticism to make people miss. I don't see consistent vision from him. I see concentration drops. I just see a guy that he needs some more refinement at his position. I think that'll come with more reps.
Yeah, I see a lot of Rashad White. I forget who it was that you comped to Rashad White earlier, but when I watch Woody Marks, yeah. And when I see DJ Giddens, I see, a slightly taller, slightly thinner Rashad White, where he's not good at breaking through contact. He's a very good one-cut runner. If he's able to plant that foot in the ground and get upfield, he's got the speed where he can rip off the big plays. But you see him just consistently going down with arm tackles or just little bumps that are knocking him out of bounds. And that's kind of the fear for me. And that's one of the reasons that I dislike LaQuint Allen, too. These tall, thin guys don't typically pan out at the NFL level. So, I mean, it's possible that DJ Giddens can pack some pounds on, but let's say he does, put some weight on, get up to, 225, then he might lose that explosiveness that made him, special in college. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You want him to put weight on, but you don't want him to lose the speed. Not crazy about the prospect here, but, he does have big play upside. So, if he ends up in a team where he's an injury away guy and he gets plugged in for those spot starts, I think that the big play upside is alluring enough that you can look at him as one of those guys that you're starting when the opportunity arises.
Dave, give us 20 seconds on Taj Brooks. I know you've been dying to do it.
I actually deleted my Taj Brooks notes because I knew that we weren't going to talk about him today. But, he's an older guy, of course, and I know
that's all the time we've got for today, folks. Sorry, I just really wanted to set you up for that. I really just wanted to set you up for that. We will do probably a deeper dive at some point where we talk about late round guys.
Yeah, and Taj Brooks will be my late round guy that I'm going to be targeting in a lot of drafts. Just I like those thick guys that have really quick feet, and he has that. He can move through a messy line of scrimmage. Sometimes people will use that as a knock against him, saying that he dances behind the line of scrimmage too much. I think that he was playing behind a terrible offensive line and was still able to turn nothing into something on countless occasions.
Don't say people say that. Alfredo said that. I said that.
I don't want to throw you under the bus, but
no,
hard to bring down on first contact, shifty for his size. He's a thick boy approved, got that stamp of approval, 5'10", 230. I am just a big fan of Taj Brooks. And of course, the longevity is the concern there. He might not be in the league 5 years from now, but I think he's another one of those guys that can get drafted, immediately plugged into an NFL team, and will be productive as soon as week 1 if given the opportunity.
Stop giving away the cow for free, dude. No one's going to go to the store and buy the milk. If you want to go and read all about my report on Taj Brooks and why I'm not as high as Dave, go check out the brand new free version 1 of the Football Guys Rookie Guide. You can find it at footballguys.com/rookie guide. It'll be emailed directly to you. You can also find that link here in both the podcast and directly in the description and the comments of the YouTube video here down below. All the artwork that you've been seeing today comes from that rookie guide, and there's going to be so many different updates to this guide where we're going to be updating our rankings. The rankings have already changed since we first released this thing, and we're ready to just continue to give you guys the best and most up-to-date information, especially after the combine. We're going to be back again. Dave and I will be back again next week talking about the wide receivers in this draft class. We're going to keep doing this as rookie month goes on and we get closer and closer to the NFL draft just before NFL free agency starts. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.